Hello, New York Giants fans, and welcome to a new edition of the Valentine's Views podcast here on YouTube. Please like, share, and subscribe to support the channel. I know, Giants fans, I have been slacking this week. This is the first show I've done all week. I know, I apologize, but we are here. We are back in business and got a couple of goodies for you today. I want to talk a little bit about the salary cap, a little bit about void years, and then I have a special guest for you. Have Erin Coscarelli of Bleav in Rams coming on. I did an interview with Erin to discuss the Matthew Stafford situation. So hopefully we'll get some insight. We'll get some answers into that when I play that interview for you here in a couple of minutes. Just wanted to talk about void years. Wanted to talk about Joe Shane's salary cap philosophy quickly. Get a lot of questions to the Big Blue View mailbag about Shane and about his why his cap philosophy has differed so much from the void year, push so much money into the future philosophy that Howie Roseman has used to such great success with the Philadelphia Eagles. The Giants under Joe Shane are currently, I think, one of only two teams in the NFL without a single player contract that includes any void years. And it's a different philosophy. It's a different way of doing business. It's a pay now instead of pay later kind of philosophy. Howie Roseman and the Eagles have been in that win now, push money into the future phase where if if they have everything come due, if the bill comes due a few years from now, they've still got two Super Bowl appearances and one Super Bowl title in the last 3 years out of doing things this way. And Howie Roseman and the Eagles aren't going to mind that at all. Um, Joe Shane has been in a different place with the New York Giants. The Giants are trying to build. Joe has spent the first couple of years of his tenure trying to dig out from under a salary cap mess that was left to him by Dave Gettleman. Um, but and I've understood why Joe Shane has done things the way that he's done, why he hasn't wanted to push money into the future, why he hasn't wanted to utilize the void years. You want to get your house in order first. And I think the Giants are at a point where they have done that. They have a good amount of cap space this year. They'll have roughly 48 million under a cap that's estimated to be somewhere between 277 and a half and 281 and a half million dollars. It could be 46 million, it could be 50 million, but they'll be in good shape. They're in really good shape for the 2026 season with more than $100 million in cap space. I think that Joe Shane and the Giants are in a place where, I get asked all the time why the Giants don't embrace the void years, why they don't do things that way. I think they are now in a place where Joe Shane should begin to embrace pushing money into the future. Where I think they're in a place where they need to do that. They need more talent. You're looking at a division where the Eagles just won a Super Bowl. They still have a fairly young quarterback. They have a young core. They're going to be good for the foreseeable future. You have a division where the Washington Commanders have Jaden Daniels and a terrific young quarterback, a good young core. They're not going anywhere. They're going to be good for a while. There might be a Super Bowl title in their future. The Dallas Cowboys are perennially disappointing to their fans, not to Giants fans and not to the rest of the NFL at large, but perennially disappointing to Jerry Jones and Cowboys fans, but always talented and always capable. The Giants are looking up from the bottom. They have a GM now and a head coach now who are on a hot seat, who need a talent infusion. They can't leave any tools in the toolbox per se when it comes to to building this roster, to adding talent, and not using void years, not being willing to push money into the future is, in my estimation, nowadays, that's leaving a tool in the toolbox. The idea of not pushing too much money into the future used to be solid business strategy. But as Howie Roseman has so aptly figured out, the salary cap is exploding year over year. It's just skyrocketing more than projected to. Between 2024 and 2025, it will have gone up more than $50 million. Dollars are cheaper in the future with the cap continuing to explode, and it's going to continue to rise. It's going to continue to do that. It's not going backwards. $100 million today isn't the same as $100 million on a contract in 2028 or 2029. That $100 million is going to look like $70 million 4 or 5 years from now. So push the money into the future when the cap will be bigger, when you'll be able to, when those will be quote unquote cheaper dollars. I think not doing that, not doing that with at least some contracts is leaving yourself without the ability to build the best roster that you can now. And obviously being under fire like Joe Shane and Brian Dable are, they need as much talent added to this roster for 2025, 2026 if they still have their jobs. They need as much talent as they can add now. So, I mean, I don't want them to, as Joe has said, I don't want them to pull off Hail Marys and overpay everybody and be crazy and trade away all their draft picks and to try to fix everything in 2025. But it's time to sort of open up the cap philosophy a little bit, and use those void years and begin to play the game the way the game is played now. So, I look at it like, I'm an old guy and I played basketball in high school, and the 3-point shot didn't exist in those days when I played high school basketball. Um, by the way, I was a jump shooter. I was a guy that loved to stroke the 18 to 20-foot jump shot. But and in the modern game today, I would be one of those guys hanging out by the 3-point line, letting everybody else do all the work, just catching balls and knocking down 3-point shots. That would be me today. Like I said, let everybody else do the work. But it's I look at basketball now, and it's, if you don't take advantage of the 3-point shot, you're not taking advantage of all the tools in the toolbox. And that's how I kind of look at the void years and managing the cap now. So my hope is that Joe Shane will begin to take advantage of the void years, spread some money out, give himself the ability to bring more players into the current roster to help the Giants try to close this talent gap and try to keep up with the Commanders, with the Eagles, try to close that gap a little bit and put a better product on the field. All right, that's enough of me yapping. I think let's get to a very informative, very insightful interview that I did with Erin Coscarelli of Bleav in Rams as we discussed the Matthew Stafford to the Giants situation. All right, Giants fans, is all this Matthew Stafford to the Giants chatter real? Is it fake? How in the world did we get here with a Super Bowl window team like the Rams, considering the possibility of moving on from their quarterback? I don't have all the answers to all of these questions, but here to help me out is the person who does. That is Erin Coscarelli,
Mhm.
Rams correspondent for Bleav in Rams. Erin, thank you so much. And like I said, we're expecting all the answers, all the goods here.
I've got all the tea leaves right in front of me, so don't worry about it, Giants fans. I know exactly what Stafford's doing next year or this season, I guess.
All right. So, Erin, let's talk about this. Let's yeah. Now that we've set everybody up that way, let's talk about this. This is a team in a Super Bowl window. We know it's always about the money when it comes to these guys. But how in the heck did we get here with the Rams? If you can just sort of explain to people, I know there's a contract situation with him, but just explain to people, what is actually going on between Stafford and the Rams right now.
Well, I mean, it started during, what was around the trade deadline, I believe right before the Rams. I want to say it was right before maybe it was right after their bye week. They had a Thursday night football matchup against the Vikings. They ended up winning. But right before that, and it was early, it was, maybe week 7 in the season. And the Rams had, offensive line issues. They had injuries to both wide receivers, Cooper Cup and Puka Nakua. And at that time, before they ended up beating the Vikings, who ended the season very favorably, um, they weren't sure. They had started the season 1-4 ahead of the bye, right? So at that point, I think a lot of people were wondering, do we go all in and sort of get draft stock, which is something that Les Snead likes to do? Well, who could we potentially put up? Of course, Stafford and Cooper Cup. Good news, Rams ended up winning. Now they're sort of in Super Bowl contention. They're not sellers, now they're buyers. So there were kind of weird things that were happening during the season when the Rams really sputtered early, right? They
Mhm.
started 1-4 ahead of the bye. And then that game against the Vikings, which they ended up winning, really was uh sort of the decider of how the team was going to strategize moving forward. Now, here we are, almost end of February. Combine is coming up. You're going to be there. The draft is a month and a half, couple months away. And I think it's time for the Rams to be serious about what this team's identity is. And what this team identity was this past season was young infused with old, right? Matthew Stafford's 37 years old. And don't get me wrong, he still can sling it. But they have to be realistic about it. So what does the future look like? Are they going to find a bridge quarterback? Maybe trade Stafford. You take let's look at the Jets situation, right? Even Boomer Esiason made an interesting point about, sure, okay, you guys get, let's say the Giants trade for Matthew Stafford. Well, the Jets experiment didn't really work out very well. Don't get me, not that these are like a one for one trade off. I'm not saying Rodgers is what Stafford is, but do I think that the Giants are a Stafford away from a championship? No, not really. So
Mhm.
I don't think it makes a lot of sense, but I think the Rams are always going to listen if a deal is put in front of them, depending on how attractive it is, depending on who they think can bridge the future. Maybe they'll be all ears. I just don't think it's going to end up happening with the Giants, and I don't even know if if Giants fans actually want that.
Yeah, it's an interesting dynamic from the Giants' perspective because the Giants need a long-term answer at
Right.
quarterback, and obviously Matthew Stafford is a short-term answer. But the the flip side of that from the Giants' perspective is you have a head coach and a GM who are not in their first or second year. They don't have the grace of a long runway. They are on the hot seat. They need to get this turned around. So I think that's where the conversation comes in because they need an answer now. They don't need a guy that could maybe be an answer 2 years from now. They need an answer now because otherwise they're not going to have jobs in a year. But but what I did want to ask you about Stafford is so that people understand he does have a contract for the next 2 years. But my understanding is that contract is basically, or was basically, because it's got very little to no guaranteed money, it's more or less a placeholder. And there
Mhm.
was an expectation that they would revisit. And I've seen people say there's just sort of weird vibes between Stafford and the Rams right now. Am I right at, that basically the contract that's in place was expected to be kind of a placeholder, and we'll figure it out later?
Yeah, and that's something that the Rams like to do too. They like to revisit the contract each year, and it's something that Stafford wanted. They readjusted his contract this last season, and yeah, I think he wants, as he's getting older, some metrics in place that show up in a more guaranteed profile for his contract. But the Rams have to be smart about this. That's why are letting Cooper Cup go. Cooper Cup is 31 years old, hasn't been healthy for an entire season since the 2021 season. So, if there's a guy that's really smart about contracts when it comes to year in, year out, it's got to be Les Snead.
Hmm.
2012, I think he's been with the team,
Hmm.
and he's managed to take his team to the Super Bowl without having a first round pick since Barack Obama was in office. I mean, you have to be smart, you have to be savvy. I think Matthew Stafford is of course a fan favorite here in Los Angeles, and so was his wide receiver, Cooper Cup. I'm a fan of Kelly Stafford. I think sometimes her name has come up. Kelly Stafford, obviously the wife of Matthew Stafford, her name's come up in the media because she has an amazing podcast and she doesn't hold back when it comes to her thoughts. Um, do front office franchises love that? I'm not sure. But I think it's the NFL is a bottom line business. It's not personal. So I think Stafford's very aware. Now, does he want to go to a place like New York, or does he want to go to an immediate contender in the event he gets a release? Which, by the way, I think he carries a $49 million cap hit in if in fact he is released. So this is where it's really hard to be a GM. And this is why I got into broadcast and not math, because trying to figure out salary cap hits, dead money, where maybe do you make it a post June 1 designation to absorb what they're doing with potentially what they're doing with Aaron Rodgers. That's the biggest question mark, is what's the most bang for your buck? And I think they have to realize that Stafford has a year, 2 years. Do they want to get draft capital for him now while his value is relatively high? Maybe. Time
But
will tell.
they're caught. My understanding is they're caught in sort of a weird place because they are in what you would consider to be a Super Bowl window. They are, a contending team, and yet they're a young roster with an old quarterback.
That's right.
So it's which way do they go? Do they go all in to try to win it? Um to try, or do they play this out for the future and build around that young roster? Um what's your I think your gut probably tells you the same thing that mine does, that Matthew Stafford's going to be a Ram next year.
Uh all signs point to the fact that he would like to stay in LA. I think he has 4 kids. Of course, you want to protect your future, and you want to realize you should go to, in my opinion, I like what happened with Saquon. I support. I'm sorry, you're a player. You're taking hits. You got to go where maybe the money is the most favorable. Now, Stafford's already won a Super Bowl ring. I think he's looking at that Hall of Fame. I think he wants to get one more. And like you mentioned, they just came off a NFC West title. They hung in there with the Eagles. They gave the Eagles more fits than the Chiefs, obviously. It
Mhm.
was a much closer game. Um, I think that's what's interesting about what we're gonna see in the NFL this off season, leading to up to the draft. I think it's this is why it's very interesting to me, these storylines, because Stafford's gonna make an interesting decision. I personally, and from what I hear, he's gonna stay in Los Angeles, but I think at this point, they've all gotta protect themselves, and like you mentioned, this is a team that's ready to win now, but it's a very interesting time because it's infused with a lot of young talent, and you've got a quarterback who just turned 37, and, is coming off an okay season. So,
Mhm.
um, time will tell, but it is very interesting. I think we'll see what they end up deciding in soon, because that's by the way, that was the other thing that Sean McVay said. He's like, we would like clarity sooner rather than later. So I think it's Stafford's decision, and all this rumorville stuff going on. I think it's the Rams just making sure they're hedging their bets.
Well, as you said, with the combine coming up, and we know that no decisions technically get made at the combine, but decisions get made at the combine. Things happen, they just don't get made public until the appropriate time. So we are hitting decision making time. So it is, as from Sean McVay's perspective, he needs to know, because he and
That's right.
Les Snead need to know, do they need to make sure Jimmy Garoppolo stays in LA, or do they need to go out and get somebody else? So we're heading into a fun time. Do
Yeah.
you think do you think, Matthew Stafford went through all those years in Detroit with a bad team. Do you think that Matthew Stafford would say yes to a situation like New York? Now, it's a bad football team. It's been a bad football team. It's got a coach on the hot seat, but there are obviously other things about New York that can help set someone up in his post football career. Do you think Matthew Stafford, when you take the whole, New York, New Jersey market and the football team in and put that all in a pie, is it a place he would even be interested in?
It was one of the things. I mean, well, first of all, you saw the Daniel Jones disaster, but it's one of the things that I think, I was always surprised why Aaron Rodgers, went head to head with the New York media. It's not lost on me. It's I grew up here in LA. I went to USC. I I worked for the USC Trojans when Pete Carroll was our head coach, and Matt Leinart was the quarterback and Reggie Bush was the running back. So part of the media here in LA, it's a different vibe. I think New Yorkers, they want results. They expect results. I just can't picture Stafford, from Detroit, then LA, then trying to face off against a New York media where I think he would be in over his head. It's like I said earlier in the show, the Giants are not a Stafford away from all their problems being solved. Would he want what ended up happening to Aaron Rodgers? Which again, I was always so curious why Rodgers decided to deal with the New York media. It's not easy. Like I said, they like results. I don't think so. I really don't. I think that let's just talk about the weather. I mean, it's cold in New York.
Mhm.
LA, it's you got the beach and you got sunshine, and you know, he's got four daughters that are in school here. Sure, money talks, but I bet you he'd be willing to figure it out to stay here in LA and bring some playmakers alongside. So, no, I just don't see it, Ed. I don't see it.
Yeah, it's one of those things that's nice to talk about. It fills some off-season airtime and newsprint and all that, but I don't see how it makes sense when you're in a window where you can win as a team, and when you're on a team that can win. I don't see how it makes sense to push so hard that you wind up, pushing yourself out the door.
And I know the Rams had offensive line issues this year, which is very scary. Stafford had not turned 37 yet, but the Giants have some offensive line issues. Do you think a 37-year-old quarterback who's really truly one of the least mobile QBs in the NFL is going to go, you know what? Let me take on New York. Let me see if I can make things happen. I just don't see it. I
Hmm.
don't see it. I think I don't see it for Stafford, but I also don't think I see it for the Giants because to leverage your future, let's say Stafford, they're suggesting he would command a first round pick. Why would the Giants put themselves back and then have to figure out the future again?
Right.
That I just I
I
think
could,
it's
yeah, I could see 34 being in play for the Giants, their first pick in the second round. I could see that being in play, but I can't I can't see a world where Joe Shane allows the number 3 pick to be in play for a 37-year-old quarterback.
agreed. And that is one of the things that Les Snead, the GM for the Rams, is very good at. He loves to stack his draft chips. So if something comes down the pipe that's unbelievable for Stafford, sure. I agree with you though, Ed. I cannot picture number 3 being the exchange for Stafford when I would assume that would put your franchise back a lot.
Absolutely, it would be it I know Joe well enough. He promised this offseason not to throw any quote unquote Hail Marys to try to save his job. And to me, that's a Hail Mary of the highest order. And I just don't see it. So
That's right.
we will see what happens. How much does Stafford have left? I mean, he's 37. There's a cliff coming. Does he have a couple years of high level football left, or is it just impossible to say when you get to that age?
Yeah, that's a good question, right? He just turned 37. I want to say he turned 37 in February. Every elite QB we saw with Rogers, they have their endpoint. Um and I think that's a great question because you know, Kyron Williams takes a load off of your quarterback. They figured things out finally with the offensive line. They had so many different iterations of what the offensive line looked like because of injuries. They put a rookie under um, center. And I think that's the question is what sort of reinforcements will the Rams, and GM Lesney do to protect their quarterback? And I think that will be the tell of whether or not Stafford's in it for the next year or two. I think the Rams, if we're just going to talk team needs right now, they need somebody to help carry the load for Kyron Williams, who's now back to back, been the workhorse for their run game. So they need somebody to kind of, 1-2 punch there in the backfield. Now they need to figure out. I can't imagine Cooper Cup, and even though it might be hard to find a trade partner, I can't imagine Cooper Cup's going to stay. Even though I've read that there's a possibility. So now they need somebody and a different type of wide receiver than Puka Nakua. So the Rams have issues too. Just because they won the division and they kept in it with the Eagles, they have to figure out their future. And if their future is Matthew Stafford, they're going to have to figure out reinforcements to protect him and keep him in the long term for a year or two. So, I mean, I think Stafford is with the Rams next year? Yes. The year after that, that's a big question mark.
All right, Aaron, I think I know that you have another commitment here shortly, so I am going to let you go. I think we have solved it all. I think the Giants they just need to sign Russell Wilson and draft Shitter Sanders and be done with it.
That's right. You know what? I think that's the best alternative we've heard here so far. Yeah.
All right, Aaron, I appreciate the time and thank you very, very much.
Thank you for having me, Ed. Appreciate it.
And that's our show for today, Giants fans. Our thanks to Erin Coscarelli of the Bleav in Sports Network for a few minutes and for breaking down all of the various parameters of the Stafford situation. And as always, thank you guys for listening. Please stay safe out there. Take care of each other, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye bye.